What's going on, everybody? Welcome into the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. And today, what I kind of want to go over is maybe not the most fun topic, right? But I want to look at the 5 biggest concerns for this Packers team going into this 2021 season. And it got me kind of thinking the other day. So Davante Adams apparently was talking to Charles Woodson. If you listen to the Woodson pep talk with the team the other day at practice, apparently Woodson was talking to Adams, about winning the Super Bowl, and Adams said, listen, we've got everything. And I'm obviously paraphrasing here a bit, but we've got everything here in Green Bay that we need to win a Super Bowl this season. And absolutely agree with Davante Adams. First of all, I think Green Bay has the depth, the roster, the talent, the high-end talent. I think they have a division that they can win. I think they're going to get home games in the playoffs. I think they have the formula needed to win it all. It's just obviously going out and doing it, especially after 2 back-to-back NFC Championship losing seasons, two seasons where they lost in the NFC Championship game, I should say. Can they get over that hump? But it kind of got me to thinking of okay, they have everything, but where are my concerns as we start heading into this season? What could be different areas that could still leave this Green Bay team coming up a little bit short? And again, I know it's not the most fun thing to think about because, of course, we always want to think positive thoughts and hope that everything's just going to be perfect and there's not going to be any issues. But I think there are still some concerns with this team and this roster and some things that they're going to have to overcome. I think that's an important part of the process, right? I think every great team has adversity and just issues that they have to overcome. There's no perfect team in the NFL. So I think it's smart to be aware of what some of those potential weaknesses are, so you can kind of keep an eye out for it as a fan to see, all right, are these things becoming an issue, or is Green Bay, are the Packers overcoming it to the point where it's not an issue? And if you take this list that I'm about to give and it becomes a non-issue, I can pretty much guarantee you Green Bay is in a very good spot to win a Super Bowl. Now, I'm not talking about injuries here, right? Of course, potential injuries, right? If Aaron Rodgers goes out, there goes the Super Bowl in all likelihood, right? But these are things that I have concerns about where things stand today, for the most part. Get into that more in just a moment. But let's start with number 1. And interestingly enough, number 1 is an area that I have concern over, but it's also one of my favorite aspects of this current team, and that's the offensive line. So why is it one of my favorite? If you listened to me talk to Aaron Nagler the other day, you heard me say there's no coaches that I trust more than Adam Stenavich and Luke Butkus on this roster. I think, honestly, one of the strengths of the Packers right now is their ability to find offensive line talent, especially later in the draft, is their ability to develop offensive line talent with Stenavich and Butkus, and then is Matt LaFleur's philosophy to put the best 5 on the field and go out and have the opportunity to compete and do well along the offensive line, game in and game out, based on that philosophy. I've loved what they've done. I thought they took a major step in a real positive direction a season ago, but I do think there are some concerns that are at least worth discussing here. Of course, first and foremost, David Bakhtiari going to be out the first 6 weeks of the season. And I think the interesting thing here with Bakhtiari is we think about that. All right, he's out the first 6 weeks of the season, but they're probably playing it safe. He should be back week 7. Well, there's an interesting aspect there, right? He can't practice until he's off the PUP list, which is after week 6. And then you open up a window to practice. They probably have, 2 team practices that week? Are you going to allow them just to have 2 team practices and then go out and play the following week? There very easily could be a ramp-up period there. Maybe it's 7-8 weeks that he's out before they feel comfortable putting him in actual game action to get him through some practices and maybe a little bit of contact here and there. So he's just not going out and all of a sudden competing at the highest level. So I think there could be a little bit of a ramp-up period. I think beyond that, then it's, all right, listen, I'm not saying this is a dig to David Bakhtiari. He looks in phenomenal shape, phenomenal shape. He looks great. He looks like he's ready to play, frankly. And I'm no doctor. I'm sure they're being smart here, but he looks great. But if you haven't played since December of last year, there's a difference between in shape and in football shape, right? So when he comes back, then after those 6, 7, 8 weeks, whatever it is, how long does it take him to kind of reacclimate? And then is he David Bakhtiari? Listen, one of David's very, 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 very few weaknesses is he struggles at times with a bull rush. He struggles to anchor. Does he have any trepidation or issue, with his leg now that he tore his ACL? Is his anchor still good? Can he hold up at the point of attack? I want to see those things to see if he's, David Bakhtiari, or if he's like 75-60% of David Bakhtiari, which by the way is still very good, but there's a difference there, right? Without David Bakhtiari, I do still have some question marks. You likely have two rookies starting on the interior in Myers and Newman. You've got Lucas Patrick probably starting at left guard, who is solid but unspectacular and is going to leave a little bit to be desired from time to time. Elton Jenkins, I think, is going to be really good at left tackle. I don't have any concerns there. And then Billy Turner has had some issues, some inconsistencies. I still think he's an average to above average offensive lineman, but again, still some issues. You go back to that Tampa Bay game last year, Elton Jenkins, Billy Turner, Lucas Patrick, they all got beat down by that Tampa Bay defensive front. Now, it's a good defensive front in Tampa, but they got beat down. Now your other two you're adding on to that are two rookies in Royce Newman and Josh Myers. So I think there's some question marks that are going to need to be answered. Can teams disguise blitzes against a center guard duo that are two rookies on the interior? I think Lucas Patrick is going to have a lot of value as the left guard, and that's why I expect him to be there and not John Runyon Jr. I do have some concerns with the depth as well. I don't think John Runyon Jr. had a great camp. I don't think Dennis Kelly had a great camp even prior to getting injured. I think Yash had a really nice preseason, so there's some potential there, but he's still a question mark. So I question some of the depth along the offensive line. So I think those are some questions that ultimately need to get answered, is just how good is that offensive line? Because listen, Rodgers, that trio of running backs, a bunch of depth at wide receiver, you've got your full, I don't even know what you would call it, not a trio. They've got four tight ends, full arsenal, I guess, of tight ends that you can use in a million different ways. Your blocker, your overall tight end in Tunyon, you have your blocker in Lewis. You've got your H-back in DeGuara. Daphne's more of an H-back, but can do a little bit of everything. I love that group. They have everything that they need on offense to be successful if that offensive line holds up. And if they do, it's, they're going to be the number one offense in the league again. So I think that's the question mark. And if they're not up to task, if, Billy Turner, struggles like he has at certain times within the last couple seasons, if the rookies aren't ready, Lucas Patrick, is, I guess just even Lucas Patrick, right? I think there's some concerns there, especially prior to David Bakhtiari coming back. So that's number one on my list. Number two is corner. And what I always think about is like, there's a difference in playoffs, right? You go back to the Milwaukee Bucks, like in playoff basketball, like whatever team you're a fan of in basketball, when you get to playoff basketball, everything is a degree of different. Like they are attacking everything, every weakness that you have, every, little, inconsistency in your armor. They're going to find the weakness in your armor and they're going to attack it over and over and over and over again. And that's why when the Bucks had Eric Bledsoe, they had a weakness on their team. They knew they had to improve it. They go out and get Drew Holiday. And frankly, without Drew, they don't win the championship, right? With the Packers, what was the weakness in the armor, especially defensively, that other teams were attacking in the playoffs, specifically the Buccaneers? Kevin King and Chandon Sullivan. They found the weakness. They're certainly not going to throw at Jair, and they attacked it over and over and over again. And they had a lot of success with it, and they had a great wide receiver core, a great quarterback to do that. And they took advantage of it. Now, fast forward a year later, the Packers drafted Eric Stokes. We don't know yet if that's going to be an upgrade. We don't know if he's going to be on the field. My guess, and I think the expected starters at this point, Jair Alexander, Chandon Sullivan, Kevin King. And now Tampa, a little, to some extent, and we'll see how teams, do it, and if they can do it without Tom Brady and Evans and Godwin and that sort of thing, and Antonio Brown, etc. But do other teams try to attack in that same way? Hey, we're going to just attack Chandon Sullivan and Kevin King, especially on, third downs. And is that going to be a big issue? Can Eric Stokes step up? Can Sullivan and King play better? I think that still has to be addressed, and especially when you get into the playoffs, those weaknesses are going to try to be exploited, and I guarantee you other teams are going to test out Sullivan and King unless Stokes is ready and better, or unless King or Sullivan or both improve this upcoming season. So I still have some concerns. And then again, I think depth at corner too, right? You have four. Shamar Jean-Charles is not ready. And Isaac Yiadom, not going to be the answer, right? You've got four corners. That's it. And they probably need 3, right? That's all they need is 3. You can figure out the rest. But if 2 guys go down, or even, I mean, heaven help everyone if Jair Alexander goes down, right? So corner, definitely still a concern. I think that's something that Green Bay is going to have to get better at as the season goes along, and something that they're probably going to have to overcome this year. Number 3 is Z's back injury. Green Bay doesn't need, or they can't just have hit and miss Zadarius Smith with a bad back where he's going to be in some games, out some games, and when he is in there, he's not quite himself. They need 100% 2019 Zadarius Smith. That Zadarius Smith changes everything. 2020 Zadarius Smith is good, but he's not the complete total game wrecker, game changer that we saw in 2019 that just, again, changes your defense. And if he's even, a step down from 2020 because of back injuries, which can, linger throughout the course of a season, I think that's got to be a concern as well. Green Bay defensively has to win with Gary, Preston, Zadarius, and Kenny Clark. That has to be a strength. They have to be able to get major pressure with those 4 players, ease some of those concerns at corners, let the safeties, Savage and Amos, do some cherry picking on the back end because you got good pressure, take some of the pressure off of that linebacking core. It has to be great up front, and Z's injury is a little bit concerning to me. Number 4 is adversity. Now, this is a veteran team, especially with Aaron Rodgers, Davante Adams, David Bakhtiari. They have an amazing, in my opinion, coach in Matt LaFleur. But over the last 2 seasons since Matt LaFleur has got here, there hasn't been a ton of adversity. David Bakhtiari going down injured right before the playoffs was really their biggest adversity, in my opinion. Outside of that, they haven't faced it. They haven't even lost 2 games in a row yet. There's a little bit of a powder keg here, right? Powder keg's a strong word, so maybe not quite that, but you're in the last dance to some extent. There's a lot of pressure on this team. You have some guys who've got their contracts, Aaron Jones, David Bakhtiari, Kenny Clark, etc. You've got some guys who didn't. Maybe contract is not the right word there, but obviously Aaron Rodgers has some level of unhappiness with his overall situation. You've got Zadarius Smith who didn't get paid, Davante Adams who didn't get paid. If you start facing some adversity and things start going wrong, how far does Aaron Rodgers go to try to correct that on his own? There's just a lot of things that could be issues there if things don't go right and things could spiral out. I don't think that's going to happen. I think this is going to be a team that's very cohesive and together. They very much seem on the same page. They seem in a really great spot right now. I think Matt LaFleur does a tremendous job with rallying the troops. I think all that stuff from the offseason, I think most of it has settled itself out outside of maybe Davante a little bit, I think, and maybe Zadarius a little bit. But overall, I think they're in a good spot. But I do think that at some point they're going to face some adversity this season. You can't go 3 years with almost no adversity. It's going to happen, right? So I'm interested to see how they deal with that. And I'm interested to see, especially maybe some of those players who have some maybe issues with the team, how they specifically deal with it as well. Last, number 5 is roster flexibility. Green Bay has basically used every resource besides Davante Adams that they can to create cap space and add players to this team. If there's a major injury and Brian Gutekunst wants to go out and trade for a big player, there could be some really creative ways that they could figure something out, but they're going to be very hard pressed to do anything. This is the roster. There's not going to be much change to it. There's going to be some changes with injuries, right? And you're going to bring in some guys off the practice squad. Maybe you find a veteran Jared Valdir or something like that, like they have the last couple of seasons. I'm not saying they can't do some of that stuff, but trade deadline, if a major player gets cut, I just don't think they're going to have the resources to attack that. Meanwhile, some other competing team will. So there's going to be a team that probably attacks the trade deadline or tries to find a way to add a significant player to their roster, and it's probably not going to be the Packers. So Other teams may add, and Green Bay just doesn't have that flexibility. And again, if they have a major injury and they need to replace a player like that, again, they just don't have the financial means to be able to do that. So offensive line, corner, Zadarius' injury, adversity, and roster flexibility are my 5 concerns going into this season. I'll give you one bonus one as well, because who doesn't want more things to worry about? And that's, of course, COVID. When you're on an all-in sort of season and you have a pandemic going on and there's strict protocols for if anyone gets COVID and who has to sit out games. Listen, this isn't a Milwaukee Bucks podcast. I get that, but go back to the NBA finals. The Bucks have 2 Antetokounmpos, and one of them in the finals was diagnosed with COVID and missed the last couple games of the finals. If that's the other Antetokounmpo and not Thanasis, the Bucks probably aren't NBA champions. They could have done all that right, go all in, get Drew Holiday, make it all the way, make it past the Nets and the Hawks and up, I guess tied 2-2, in the NBA Finals, and all of a sudden Giannis goes out with a COVID issue, and now the Suns win the championship because of COVID. If the other Antetokounmpo gets COVID and it's Giannis instead of Thanasis, the Suns are champs and the Bucks aren't. Simple as that. If the Packers get to a point, could be the same thing, right? If the wrong Rodgers gets COVID in the champion, going into the playoffs or NFC Championship, something like that. If it's Amari, you can get by with it. If it's Aaron, probably not. So, you have to be aware of that stuff too. And again, when you're in an all-in sort of season and so many chips are in the middle of the table, yeah, that's there's cause for concern there when an illness that you have no control over could completely obliterate your team at a moment's notice. Even with the, whatever. I'm not going to get into it. But so, yeah, those are my concerns. O-line, corner, Z, adversity, roster flexibility, and of course, a pandemic. Fun times, right? I know not a super fun conversation. I want to go back to the beginning really quick because I don't want to end it on that note. I want to end it with, I think Green Bay has everything to overcome all of those things I just mentioned. I think they got the playmakers. I think they got the talent. I think it's going to be a really fun season. But if you want to watch to see what could derail Green Bay, or more importantly, what they could overcome so it doesn't derail them, I think the things we discussed today are the things that you're watching out for as potential red flags. That's going to do it for me today. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll be right back here tomorrow with a more positive, fun episode, I promise. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.